And I get the great privilege of introducing Mr. David Mulroney. He's our esteemed keynote speaker for this evening. And many of you know David Mulroney. Mr. Mulroney spent the majority of his 30-plus years of the Canadian Foreign Service focused on Asia in general and China in particular. He has the unique distinction of being a former ambassador to China, who has also headed Canada's office in Taiwan. Mr. Mulroney's other diplomatic posts have included acting as Prime Minister's personal representative at the G8 Summit and Canada's senior official for Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation, or APEC. Prior to his appointment to Beijing, Mr. Mulroney was assigned to the Privy Council office in Ottawa as the Deputy Minister responsible for the Afghanistan Task Force, overseeing coordination of all aspects of Canada's engagement in Afghanistan. More recently, he has served as President and Vice Chancellor of the University of St. Michael's College in Toronto. Please join me in welcoming David Mulroney.
Thank you, Steve, and thank you, MLI, for inviting me to share in this wonderful 10th birthday party. I've been looking forward for some time to this opportunity for a discussion focusing on Canada and the Indo-Pacific region. And I've been looking forward to it because it gives us the opportunity to do some fresh thinking about Canadian foreign policy. While the notion of an Indo-Pacific region isn't all that new, Canada's been slow to embrace it, to look at a very important part of the world from a different perspective. Indeed, simply making the effort to think carefully about foreign policy options has rarely been more important or more urgent. We're at the close of a long year, 12 months and then some, during which we've been compelled to re-examine our relationship with a country that has become, arguably, our second most important partner. I speak, of course, of China. More than that, it's been a year during which Canadian foreign policy itself has been on trial. We've been reminded of our vulnerability to China's economic coercion, and worse, of its willingness to use our own citizens as hostages. We've been shown repeatedly, and to our great cost, the dangers of a foreign policy that has been largely reactive. Too often, our comprehensive engagement of China has been an excuse for a foreign policy on autopilot, in which we seem to go along to get along, and in which flattery often replaces facts. We've been divided as a country. We have a China lobby, one that includes a who's who of former ministers and mandarins, extolling the economic importance of our relationship with Beijing, while a growing number of China skeptics worry that any financial benefits from China tend to be selectively and strategically distributed, and come ultimately at the peril of our very autonomy as a nation. Perhaps most worrying is that the government has appeared to endorse both sides of this debate, although fortunately not at the same time. We've seen little evidence of new thinking, little inclination by Ottawa to work out how we deal with a country that is both an important partner and an adversary. So while it is timely indeed to consider renewing our foreign policy focus, starting with a broader and less China-centric view of Asia, all of it, and the Pacific, we should first ensure that we've internalized the lessons of the past year. A successful Canadian engagement of the Indo-Pacific region involves a lot more than spinning the globe and tweaking ministerial travel schedules. But taking the time to get it right offers us the opportunity to move from a foreign policy that is broken, unrealistic, and inadequate to something that truly advances our interests and protects us to the extent possible from threats to our security, prosperity, well-being, and values. Let me assert at the outset that I am very confident we can do this. We've managed to do it before, albeit inconsistently, and while reaching that level again and staying there will be a major challenge, it's one that we're up to. And in saying this, I realize that I'm also describing the playoff prospect of my beloved Toronto Maple Leafs, but that's another conversation. Real foreign policy involves thinking clearly about who and what we are as a country, about a limited number of achievable objectives, about national assets and liabilities, and about partners, who they are, what they want, and where they're going. And it's about spending at least as much time listening, interpreting, and understanding as broadcasting and lecturing. We're rightly proud of our skills as multilateralists, but that often masks the fact that we can be fickle and inconsistent bilateralists. A regional strategy is of no use if it isn't anchored in a network of strong country-to-country relationships. And although our partners, including many who are here tonight, are too polite to say this, that means something more than having a minister show up to assert that Canada is back every few years. Trade is absolutely central to our agenda, but a successful strategy has to be about more than trade. It's about our security and the security of our closest allies. And let's be absolutely honest here. You can't aspire to any real status in the Indo-Pacific region without a robust expeditionary military capability, one that is perceived by our allies to be both credible and beneficial. This points to the hard truth that strong and effective foreign policy is an outgrowth of strong and effective domestic policy, meaning a sound economy, healthy national institutions and national infrastructure, and yes, the willingness to invest, and invest significantly, in our own security and defense. Finally, we should by no means recreate in an Indo-Pacific strategy the errors of our Asia-Pacific strategy, which, at its most threadbare, has become little more than an uncritical, unexamined, and unbalanced China policy. Make no mistake, it is late in the day, but it's not too late to get things right, particularly since the kind of thoughtful, focused, and carefully informed approach that we need to bring to our policy in the Indo-Pacific is the very approach that should characterize Canadian foreign policy writ large. I can think of no better place to start. Let's begin by paying India the respect of seeing it as it is, rather than as it exists in our Canadian imaginations. And let's be confident enough to understand that while we will agree about many things, we will disagree about others. Our ability to understand India was eroded during years in which we substituted lectures for dialogue, and during which we viewed India through the very narrow prism of its relationship with Pakistan. Unfortunately, we're in danger of replacing an arrogant and aloof approach to India with a cringeworthy kind of neediness that is deservedly being rebuffed by New Delhi. We should not force the pace of the relationship, but take time to identify shared objectives. These obviously will include trade, education, and science and technology cooperation, but should also include enhanced defense cooperation and a renewal of dialogue and trust on broader security issues. We should be more ambitious about our relationships with Japan and Korea, both of which have strong foundations but unfinished superstructures. Both deserve consistent, high-level Canadian attention. We can do far, far more with Taiwan, even within the constraints of the One China policy. This requires more energy, imagination, and courage on our part as Canadians. My 3 years in Taiwan were among the most inspirational of my foreign service career. I was impressed by its vibrant democracy, by its lively civil society, and by the many, many opportunities for cooperation with Canada. We should view Australia and New Zealand not just as Commonwealth partners, but also as charter members in a global community of democratic middle powers, all of whom have a stake in pushing back against Chinese coercion, pressure, and interference. We should aspire to a multifaceted, anchoring relationship with Singapore that has among its objectives contributing to the restoration of our credibility within ASEAN. And finally, let's be clear that no Canadian engagement of Asia, however we describe it, can exclude China. But we do need to shift from our present policy of comprehensive engagement to an approach that is much more selective and carefully managed, one that is more balanced, aligned with our interests, and attuned to our vulnerabilities. This is, of course, the same discipline that should characterize our approach to the entire region, whatever side we view it from. Getting it right would represent the first step in a new Canadian foreign policy. the first step in taking responsibility for navigating our Canadian course in a new world. We can do this. It's time to begin the conversation. Thank you.
Well, thank you so very much. I should say, Ambassador Mulroney, you are a guiding feature in our national debate on issues of the Indo-Pacific, and we're just so privileged that you were able to share some thoughts with us tonight. Thank you so very much.